Hello, Dr. Martin. My name is Dennis Rosetta. This is ORGD 6355, Organizational Change, and this is my Chapter 5 topic of interest presentation, Diagnosis for Change. Disclaimer: the views and opinions of this presentation are those of the creator and author only. That's me, and not of UIW or any member of the class, including Dr. Martin. All images attached to this PowerPoint were collected from random websites on Yahoo and Google. I wanted to make sure that I give credit where credit was due. The purpose of this presentation is to deliver a synopsis of Chapter 5, Diagnosis for Change. Now, this is a pretty lengthy PowerPoint. It's over 30 slides, so I will be doing a lot of paraphrasing, so I don't spend too much time delving into the topics. If you hear a lot of noise in the background, that's probably my two Shih Tzus making a lot of noise because they want some attention. But I hope you enjoy this presentation. Objectives: we're going to understand the role of diagnostic models, apply a range of diagnostic instruments relevant to various aspects of the process of managing, and form a view on which instruments you find most attractive or helpful. Chapter 5, Diagnosis for Change. This chapter introduces a range of diagnostic instruments that can be applied to the management of change. And here's our textbook. Now, upon opening up this chapter and reading it for the first time, I was a little bit confused because of the title of the chapter, Diagnosis for Change. This chapter actually deals with change models that we can use to help us in the change process. Now, these change models, you can use them in the figurative or literal sense. They are helpful tools and like blueprints, so to speak, or guides of how you can uniquely manage change and what you can do as an OD professional to incorporate it. So there's a lot of models here, and we'll go over them. Some of the reasons for change within organizations include changes in leadership, mergers and acquisitions, strategic planning, a decline in or plateau in organizational performance, to improve upon marketing and sales, business process improvements, organizational growth, reorganizations, and team building. Early change diagnosis. Again, a lot of paraphrasing here, but as an OD professional, you serve in the capacity of similar to a doctor. Imagine that you're a doctor and you're diagnosing the patient. The patient in this sense is the organization. You're going to identify what's going on. You're going to run a whole bunch of tests and evaluations and consultations. And you're basically just going to get to the bottom of what's going on with the organization, much like a doctor identifies what's going on with the patient. Now, from earlier chapters, we learned about different types of change managers. We have the director, the navigator, the caretaker, the interpreter, the nurturer, and the coach. Now, I put asterisks on the coach because that is who I identify with the most. Change manager as a coach will focus on the diagnostic tools that highlight the goals being sought and the competencies needed to attain them. Remember the basics. Far too often, organizational diagnostics and development, we focus on the new and interesting aspects of what we do. So it's really simple. Just stick to the basics, keeping it simple and duplicatable. The purpose of an organization is to meet the goals and get the best return on investment. The diagnostic cycle consists of orientation, goal setting, data gathering, analysis and interpretation, feedback. Feedback is very critical, especially when you get it from the entire workforce. Action planning, implementation, monitoring and measure, and evaluation. Uncertainty and the diagnostic model of organizational change. Usually, organizations start their vision about the future and know where they want their organization to be in that future. Simply put, they know where they are now and they know where they want to be in the future. So this is a nice little diagram of where you want every organization to be. You have A, and then you go all the way to B. Pretty simple, straight line, but it doesn't usually happen that way. When trying to get from A to B in an organization, sometimes there's obstacles in the way. As you can see on this diagram, you can see that there is stumbling blocks with D and C. Some of them will be already predicted in the business plan, but usually the large part of them will appear as they move forward on their business journey. Now, this is probably the most accurate of the diagrams or models that represent the organizations that I've been a part of throughout my career. When trying to get the organization, in this case the United States Navy, we always have different goals throughout my 20 years, or different objectives or different missions. When trying to get from A to B, But sometimes during that journey, we get some organizational change sources in the form of different policies or programs or other change agents that just get in the way and lead to significant hindrance to acquire that change. So why bother with models? Again, this chapter, it illustrates and highlights the way that we can use different change models. And the way I perceive them is that they were blueprints or planning or schematics that we can incorporate in a literal or figurative sense. Now the reason we use models is because as managers and as members of organizations in any capacity, we carry around in our heads our own views as to how things work and what causes what and so forth. Going back in the previous weeks, we talked about perception of reality, our own perception, and we typically ignore the perception of others. So that's our own reality. So when we incorporate these change models, we can see a different source of realities from other organizational members. The apparent option of not using a model is not a real option. The choice is whether we use one that is explicit or implicit. So in the next few slides, we're going to go over 5 or 6 different models. Some of them are very, very significant to me, and I didn't go over all of them, but these are just the most important ones that I found most significant. 5 reasons a change model can be useful. Again, a lot of paraphrasing here, but change models make things more manageable. They help identify the most important items that need the attention. They highlight interconnectedness. They provide a common language, which is very important. And they provide a sequence of actions to take in a change situation. The most important thing is to use or develop a model that works for the specific situation that an organization confronts. Application and usefulness of a diagnostic model. This slide I will read entirely because it's an important slide with a lot of great information. But OD diagnostic models derive from action research practices, where clients are involved and take an active role in the different stages of the diagnosis process, including the defining of objectives, activities, and developing a time frame to gather and analyze data. The role of the OD professional is to help guide clients in the organizational assessment process, including the selection of the diagnostic model, definition of activities, and feedback of results following the implementation of the actions. This will determine the usefulness of the entire change effort with all stakeholders involved. So when you incorporate these models, regardless of the model, change model type that you select, your organizational members are going to be involved in the process, or they're going to be involved in the planning as you make your consultation efforts and you have your meetings. You're going to choose a model and you're going to go over all of the questions within those models. And you'll understand what I'm talking about as we dive further into these models. The first model is a 6-box organizational model. It was developed by Marvin Weisbord. Keynotes, the purpose. On the keynotes, when we identify the purpose, the structure, rewards, helpful mechanisms, relationships, leadership, those are the questions that are within the model that you either, you can write it down on a gigantic whiteboard, or you can incorporate your organizational team members, or you can walk around with subordinates or workers within the organization to help answer these questions. When you select a model and when you use that for your blueprint of diagnosing the change and what needs to happen, you're either going to write all these things down and take notes, or this model is basically, it just helps you build a foundation and organize yourself into what questions to ask and how to approach these change processes. It helps you identify every single thing, every single component or aspect that is wrong or that is lacking within the organization. This is the 6-box organizational model. Now, as I envision myself using this model, I imagine myself writing it down on a gigantic whiteboard or a dry erase board or a notebook or my laptop, and I'm taking notes and I'm writing down all these questions, and I'm using the leadership and subordinates and organizational members to help me answer these questions, because we serve in the capacity of the OD professional and or the consultant. So our job is to help identify and diagnose what is going on by using such models as a 6-box organizational model. For example, the purpose. What business are we in? Okay, so my business, I'm a radiology manager. That's our business. The structure. How do we divide up the work? Okay, well, we have officers and enlisted people, and we have civilians. Rewards. What kind of rewards and incentives do we have? Okay, well, we have special days off, we have promotion and advancements, and we have cash rewards for the civilians. Healthful mechanisms. Have we adequate coordinating technologies? Do we have enough technology? Do we communicate well within the realm of the radiology department? Relationships. How are all of us getting along? How do we manage conflict among people with technologies? How do we adapt to new changes in technology as X-ray equipment advances and MRI and CT and all of those diagnostic tools as they advance with technology? And how do people manage that? And how do people manage that change and when there's conflict? And then how does it all tie into the leadership aspect? Does someone keep the boxes in balance? So that part is me, the leadership aspect. And then I then report to another leader who is a department head. And then he reports to the commanding officer. So this is just an example of the structure, the 6-box organizational model from the Navy perspective. Now these are how we approach all the proceeding models. So I don't want to take up too much time, but this is pretty much how you dive into a model and use this as your blueprint to plan. So does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, there are about 6 models left, and if I were to speak on each one, this would probably be a 2 or 3 hour presentation, and I don't want to torture Dr. Martin like that. But just know that each model follows the same theme and concept as a 6-box organizational model. So I'll just briefly talk about each one by just naming it and showing you the diagram, if that's okay. Just rest assured that all of the information are on these slides on the PowerPoint for your leisure. So I hope that's okay, Dr. Martin. This is the invisible bureaucracy model. This model was not actually in our textbook. I found it on a website that discussed the politics and bureaucracy of a lot of organizations that hinder the organization from thriving or from growing or moving forward because there's just too much red tape involved. So I found this one to be very interesting. The 7S framework model deals with 7 S's of strategy, structure, systems, shared values, style, staff, and skills. So remember, we're using that same concept. So we're going to identify components of every one of those S words, like on strategy, the plan devised to maintain and build competitive advantage over the competition, and so on. Here is the 7S framework model or diagram. The STAR model labels the 5 major components of an organization which should be in alignment. Here is the STAR model diagram. The Burke-Litwin change model. The premise of this model is that plan change should flow from the top of the diagram all the way to the bottom. Here is the Burke-Litwin change model as we start with the external environment at the top and we go all the way down to the leadership. What kind of leaders do we have? What are our management practices? What kind of culture do we have in that organization? And does the mission and strategy align with that culture? Then we focused on structure, systems, and policies, the work unit climate, motivation of our workforce, and individual organizational performance. I found the Pestel component analysis to be very interesting as it characterized organizational environment in terms of 6 factors: political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. And component analysis, the Pestel framework, here's what it looks like. Everyone should be familiar with the force field analysis. It was developed by Kurt Lewin. It provides a framework for looking at factors or forces that influence the situation and looks at the forces that are either driving movement toward a goal or blocking a movement toward that goal. Here are some great examples of force field analysis. If you look at that second diagram, look in the center. Greater board engagement or greater engagement from your workforce, that is the driving force, which is positive. And the restraining or negative force that acts against that is the skepticism of management initiatives or the skepticism of other board members. Testing the quality of your strategy. Now remember earlier I identified myself as a change manager coach. So I want to see if my strategy fits with what's going on in the environment. Does my strategy exploit key issues and resources? Will my vision of differentiators be sustainable? Are the elements of my strategy internally consistent? Do I have enough resources to pursue this strategy? And is my strategy implementable, meaning will it work and can I implement it within the organization Those are the tests of the quality of my strategy. Structural dilemmas. Many organizations' change programs involve the organization structure either directly or indirectly. One reason for this is that getting the structure right is a difficult challenge because managers confront enduring structural dilemmas, tough trade-offs without easy answers. So structural dilemmas include differentiation versus integration, gap versus overlap, underuse versus overload, lack of clarity versus lack of creativity, excessive autonomy versus excessive interdependence, and too loose versus too tight. Now, this was a very important part during Chapter 5's reading regarding surveys, consensus and sample surveys. Organizations can use consensus and sample surveys to make an early diagnosis and at the end of the change process of the organization and identify any factors they choose. Questions should be open-ended and relevant. An example would be a Likert survey. So you can implement the survey before and or after the change process. You can see how the organizational members how they felt about the change model that you implemented or any of the steps that you took to get this change process going. Now, I recommend a Likert scale type survey with open-ended questions just like this. Conclusion: the use of organizational diagnosis models is paramount for OD professionals because diagnostic models help to reveal key organizational gaps and critical areas to focus. Moreover, this analysis emphasizes the role of the OD professional as an advisor, helping clients identify the most appropriate diagnostic model given the intervention objectives and the organizational culture, and using feedback mechanisms to channel results in a non-threatening mode to later focus targeted OD interventions as the effective management of change and the improvement of the organizational effectiveness. This concludes my presentation. I hope you understood the material, and again, all of the information is relevant on each slide. I had to do a lot of paraphrasing because I didn't want the presentation to be too long. But I hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Have a great day.